Welcome, everybody, to Tokens of Wisdom. I am your host, Dave Rothschild, and I am super excited to have with me in the Tokens of Wisdom studio my dear friend, Fizza Khan, CEO of Silver Regulatory Associates. Before we dive into the episode, please listen to the disclaimer at the end of the show. Nothing we say is legal advice, tax advice, investment advice, compliance advice, la-di-da-di-da. We're all sharing our fund wisdom for educational purposes only, and so please listen to it as such. And with that out of the way, Fizza, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. This is a long time coming, so I'm really glad we finally made it happen.
It is indeed. I'm excited to be here.
Do you want to give everyone a quick intro of yourself and Silver?
I would love to. Thank you so much. As Dave said, my name is Fizza Khan. I am the founder and CEO of Silver Regulatory Associates. Silver provides a variety of services, one of which is our regulatory compliance services that we offer to private fund managers. And Dave, you know that we're going to get into that in a moment.
Absolutely.
We also offer services in the sustainability space. So our sustainability risk and strategy group will help those managers that need to meet regulatory requirements either at the state level here in the US or in non-US jurisdictions that have more formal regulations around these initiatives. And finally, we do offer due diligence services to those managers that are just starting out, so we can help them with that process in managing investor inquiries and putting together their firm DDQs.
Awesome. What a comprehensive set of services.
We try to be some good things to a lot of people.
I love that. So I want to start with the fund manager compliance stuff, because I think that's probably top of mind for many of my listeners. So
Indeed.
How does an outsourced compliance engagement work? I mean, what exactly do you do for fund manager clients in the compliance realm?
Sure. So our client base is made up of private fund managers predominantly, whether you're a hedge fund, PE, VC. We are strategy agnostic in helping you with your regulatory compliance needs. And essentially what we do is help those managers either at the initial stages when they recognize that they're forming a fund, they've come to you, Dave, to help with that process, and they recognize that there are regulatory obligations either by way of the state in which they are located or by way of a federal regulator such as the Securities and Exchange Commission. And what we do is help those clients navigate the space in such a way that they get the expertise and experience that we offer and without not necessarily needing to do it themselves. So we put together policies and procedures. We help them manage those policies and procedures by way of their compliance program and essentially be a source of advice on how to manage their regulatory obligations.
Awesome. So I'm a new manager. I'm setting up a fund.
Right.
You know, I'm super smart, so I've hired Dave to be my fund counsel.
Absolutely, as one does.
Dave has told me that I am an investment advisor, or my management company is an investment advisor, and I need to either register or claim an exemption. And Correct. Dave says, maybe Dave will do my registration or my exemption filing, maybe not. Will you do those types of filings for clients, or do you come in after they've already filed?
No, we will absolutely manage your filing and regulatory obligations by way of either if it's with the SEC, the CFTC. We will do limited purpose broker dealer, which is a bit more complicated, but we will manage that effort with the SEC and FINRA. So in answering your question, yes, we do manage the filing both at the initial stage of filing as well as any ongoing obligations.
Okay, that makes sense. And so let's say I need to register as an investment advisor. I hire you to do my registration. Let's walk through that process very quickly.
Yeah.
What does that entail exactly?
Let's say that they have engaged you, Dave, to do the fund formation process. And then they say, Dave said that we need to file what is called our Form ADV. What is that? And essentially the Form ADV is the registration document for fund managers to file either with the state or with the SEC, basically waving their hand and saying, yes, we are an investment advisor. We intend to operate as an investment advisor, and we want you, the regulator, to know that we need to file this in order to lawfully operate as an investment advisor. So that process is quite detailed. Somebody on first blush will take a look at the Form ADV and say, oh, I can do this. I just check a few boxes, write a few sentences, we're good
Mm.
to go. But what most people don't realize, and this is why they engage an outside compliance consultant such as Silver, in conjunction with a firm like yours, Dave, at CFM. What we do is essentially guide a manager through what the SEC or what the state is looking for by way of the questions that they're asking. There is a lot of room for interpretation. And
Hmm.
because of our background and our experience, we know what the regulators are looking for to ensure that we are answering these questions in a way that not only the regulators want to know the answer to, but that puts our client in the best light in front of the regulator.
Totally. And so for an RIA, like I'll put exempt advisors aside because that's a bit
Sure,
simpler, both from
it
the
is.
ADV perspective and from the ongoing compliance requirements perspective. But for a registered advisor, I like to describe the Form ADV as almost like an SAT test. There's like a multiple choice section, and there's a written section where you write a
Yes.
little essay. And the various sections of the ADV ask similar questions in different ways, and so they have to kind of conform with each other. They have to harmonize with each other, and then they also connect into your actual operations. And so you have to
Correct.
have a view toward not only getting the registration through, but then once you're registered, eventually you're going to be examined, and the regulator is going to come in and say, okay, this is what you said on your ADV. Now show me how you're actually doing that in real life. So it not
Correct.
only has to connect to itself, but it has to connect to your actual operations. So while it might seem simple, like, oh, I'll just check a couple boxes and write a couple sentences, like you said, it's more involved than that.
It is definitely more involved in that. And that's why when you engage either counsel or an outside compliance consultant to manage this process, they should be asking these types of questions. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be, oh, just give me your PPM and we'll lift from there. It really should be a dialogue between you and your consultant, you and your advisor, to understand exactly how you are implementing your investment strategy. How do you go about diligencing investments? Who on your staff is responsible for either the portfolio management or the back office operations? What do your operations actually entail? How are
Hmm.
you documenting these processes? We come in to better understand that and then give you advice on how to enhance it so that you are not only in compliance with the rules and regulations, but that you are representing to the regulator when you do get examined, that you know what you're doing as far as your regulatory compliance program is concerned.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say I've hired you, you've done my ADV,
Yep,
it's processing with the state or with the SEC, eventually I'm
correct.
approved. Are you parallel processing a set of compliance policies? Does that happen after I get registered, at the same time?
Ideally, it's at the same time or even before we do your ADV, and here's why. Now, obviously, there are going to be exigent circumstances that a manager needs to get filed right away with the regulatory body, whether it's the SEC or the state. But the ideal scenario is we will do a deep dive into your firm, your fund, what you intend to do by way of your strategy. And that informs us as to how we develop your compliance program, which should
Hmm.
be comprised of policies and procedures that ultimately are, a good description and an accurate portrayal of what exactly you're doing on a day-to-day basis as a fund manager, as an investment advisor. Essentially, you want to make sure you're doing all the right things. And this should be not only with respect to your operations, but it needs to be in line with your regulatory obligation.
Hmm.
So, what we're trying to do is find that puzzle piece that fits together. Here's what you do, and here's what the regulations require. Now, let's make both of these pieces work together.
Yep.
And so, from a timing perspective, we would prefer to do this before we delve into your ADV, but we recognize that that may not be practical.
Yeah.
So then we will do it concurrently because then as we're developing policies and procedures, we can accurately reflect what those policies and procedures represent in the Form ADV because there are going to be questions that are centered around your compliance program in the Form ADV.
I really like the description of it as two puzzle pieces, like your operations and your obligations, because I think it illustrates really well a common client question I get
Yeah.
is, hey, I just registered as an investment advisor. I need a set of compliance policies. Can you just pull one off the shelf and dust it off for me? And like maybe that would fit the obligations piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
But if it doesn't match with your actual operations, if I haven't spent the time talking to you and understanding your business, how you're actually operating on a day-to-day basis, then those puzzle pieces aren't going to fit together. And when you eventually get examined, the regulator's going to come in and say, well, your compliance policies say X, but you're actually doing Y. So what's up with that discrepancy?
Well, this is the question we get from the jump all the time. Everyone says to us, at the initial stages of engagement, can't we just use a template? Or
Yep.
I'm sure you have another client that employs the strategy we do. Can't we use theirs? And no. And the reason why is the SEC is going to see right through that. And you may have opinions on their, capabilities, but the one thing we know is that they've become much more sophisticated as far as private fund managers are concerned and the different strategies that are employed. So they will be able to spot something that is not customized. And more importantly, I'm going to bring up the old adage that I know you are familiar with, Dave, which is it is better not to have a policy than to have a policy that you are not following.
Yep.
And essentially, what you want to make sure is that the puzzle pieces fit because these policies reflect your business operations. And the one thing I also tell newly registered advisors is not to be afraid of being registered. Oftentimes we get people so concerned, they're wringing their hands. They're saying, oh my gosh, we now have to be regulated by the SEC and I don't wanna. They would rather not take in the AUM than to be registered with the SEC. And that is not practical business.
Right.
What you need to think about is taking a step back and recognizing that if you are good at what you do as a fund manager, 99% of your operations are already complying with what the rules mandate. It's just that 1% that we come in to help you to make sure that you are representing yourself the way that the SEC can understand that you're compliant.
Yeah.
So if you're good at what you do, if you know that you do it well, then let us come in and help you put literally the cherry on top. So that's what really this process entails by way of implementing and developing a compliance program.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I love the adage, right? Because if the SEC comes in and examines you, and they discover that you're not following your policies that you've written
Yeah,
out, that is an entirely separate violation from whatever the underlying conduct was that might have also been a violation. So
correct.
it's totally better to not have a policy at all than to have one that you are blatantly disregarding.
Absolutely. And the whole idea here from an advisory standpoint is for us to tell you, listen, these are all of the rules and regulations that you are subject to. And of these that you are subject to, these are the ones that are applicable to you.
Yeah.
Now, the ones that are applicable to you, let us develop a program and policies and procedures around them. So the SEC is fully aware that you know what you're doing as a regulated entity.
So one question I get from clients is, why should I hire Silver? Why don't you just do this for me? You're already my law firm.
Okay.
Why don't you just do my policies and procedures? And I mean, I guess I'm curious what you would say to that. I have a very specific answer for it also, but I'm wondering what you think.
There's two ways to approach this. I think one is that there are certain lawyers at counsel that are specifically fund formation attorneys.
Hmm.
They are looking at what is most efficient and effective for you as a fund manager in executing your investment strategy. And oftentimes that doesn't marry with the regulatory side of things. So the legal requirements and the legal efficiencies that you're seeking from counsel are perfect for the fund formation aspect. But
Hmm.
many times they may not be aware of the regulatory implications, which are completely separate and apart from fund formation. So
Yep.
that's one way of looking at it. But let's say they hire a sophisticated attorney like yourself, who is both educated and knowledgeable about the legal fund formation side as well as the regulatory side. Yes, they can certainly engage you. I think it's, quite frankly, much more expensive to do that.
Hmm.
Secondly, you, Dave, are not going to be there to then hold them accountable, hold their hand through the implementation
That's right.
of the compliance program. You will do an excellent job putting the policies and procedures together, but then you hand it off and you say, good luck to you.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good, but many times our clients require that next step, which is the implementation phase of the program.
Totally. Yeah, and I say the same thing. One, it's going to be more expensive. Yes, I could do it for you, but
Yes.
our business is not set up to offer that ongoing support on a regular basis. Our
Yeah,
business is set up to support clients in other areas with other distinct needs, and so,
correct.
paying my hourly rate to kind of hold your hand every day through the compliance process is probably not the most efficient use of your dollars. And
Correct.
frankly, I don't have because of the way we've set up our business, I don't have enough time necessarily to
No,
do that for all my clients. And so I always suggest that people who get registered hire some phenomenal provider like yourself to
thank
to
you.
help them with this process.
And it's
So,
much more efficient as well,
yeah.
not only from a cost savings, but just time, advisory, etc. And that's why relationships like ours work really well because we piggyback off of what is going on with the client. You help them to get to a certain stage, we pick up from there. If legal issues arise, we come back to you. It's
Yeah.
kind of a really good symbiotic relationship that we've developed. Yeah.
Agreed. And so that dovetails nicely into my next question, which is, okay, now I've hired you, you've helped me get registered, you've set up my policies and procedures. Now I'm off in the wild, I'm operating as an investment advisor. How involved is Silver in, the day-to-day functions of my investment advisor?
We can be as involved as the client wants us to be. And I think this is really a function of how much internal resources the
Yeah.
investment manager has. So if they are just starting out, there's only a few of them, there's no dedicated compliance team, then we can come in and be essentially their compliance team for them,
Yeah.
manage all of the day-to-day requirements, make sure that the compliance program is running efficiently. If policies and procedures need to be updated, changed, removed, we are part of that process. And we can be, you know, any gradation, variation of that type of model. It really does just depend on how the client wants to engage us to be either fully or partially involved with this process for them.
That makes total sense. And it's probably a factor of, the leaner their internal operation, the more they need day-to-day support, and the more
Exactly.
robust their internal operation, the less they need all that
Right.
day-to-day support.
And I think the one thing that I would like to emphasize is regardless of the type of engagement someone has with a firm like ours, like Silver, we will want to make sure we have open communication and dialogue with the
Hmm.
client. And that requires routine scheduled calls, meetings, etc. And the reason for that is not that we're coming from a place of, you can't do this. No, no. What we really want to make sure is that we fully understand and appreciate what is happening operationally as well as on the portfolio management side of things because the client may not know, the manager may not know, operations may not know that their actions may trigger a regulatory requirement, may trigger some form of disclosure, update
Hmm.
to the Form ADV, and we're only as good as the information that we learn from our clients. So we we always make sure to have that dialogue and open communication so that we can be proactive in giving the advice so
Yeah.
that they can manage this space with us or on, with the resources that they may have.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing something. It might trigger a regulatory requirement, or it might trigger some requirement under their existing policies that, hey, you got to document
Exactly.
this, or you have to do ABC in order to approve this kind of transactions, things like that. So that makes sense. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about
Sure.
regulatory exams. And so let's just, put the states aside. We'll talk about the SEC. Um,
Okay.
for most of your clients, once they get examined, how involved are you in the examination process typically?
Typically, we're very involved. We want to make sure that our clients feel supported.
Yeah.
And what usually happens is a client that has engaged us to be, providing ongoing support, ongoing maintenance of their compliance program. When they receive the notification from the SEC that they're going to be examined, they immediately contact us, which is what we want them to do.
Yeah.
And that is where we're off to the races. We get the team together, we start looking at the initial document request, we start prepping our client. We will be intimately involved with this process. And I think that makes sense because we now know who they are intimately, right?
Yeah.
Because now we've been a part of not only developing them as a regulated entity, filing them as a regulated entity, we've been hearing from them. That's the communication piece. We've been
Yeah.
hearing from them how they're operating, where their footfalls may be, where their, strengths are, how we want to highlight that to the regulators. And because we have concurrent exams going on with our clients, we can leverage that and we
Yeah.
can say, okay, there's a client that is exactly like you, that the SEC is poking around this particular area. We know
Hmm.
that's going to happen with you. So we're going to make sure that we're adequately covered in that regard. And it just becomes a really nice, seamless process for us to just take over and be a part of that for them.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the puzzle analogy, it's like
Yes.
the regulatory piece, and you've spent all the time to understand the operational piece, and you've helped them kind of put those pieces together into their policies and procedures. So it makes total sense that you would be the one helping them interface with the SEC during this process, especially like you said, sitting in your shoes, you're seeing all kinds of exams, and so you probably have a good sense for, okay, these are the things the SEC is looking for these days, or this is the kind of thing they
Absolutely.
look for this kind of manager or that kind of manager. And that kind of experience is, I'm sure, invaluable in guiding someone through that examination process.
For sure. And just going back to the experience with the exams and having seen multiple upon multiple exams, that experience we want to leverage even before a client gets examined.
Yeah.
So if we know that a particular manager is employing, a strategy that incorporates digital assets, for example, we have seen so many clients in that position get examined. We know the areas that the SEC is going to focus on. We know that this is an area of top priority for them to look into. So before even that request comes in, even before there's an indication of an exam even taking place, we want to make sure that all of those areas are buttoned up and really in a place that we can feel confident that there are no holes that the SEC could look through.
Yeah. I totally get that. And that makes perfect sense to me. I guess, I think we could probably do a whole episode on what is the SEC examination process, what happens, how does it work,
For
how long does it
sure.
take, things like that, and maybe we'll do
Yes.
another episode like that. But I want to, on the topic of exams for this episode, I just want to understand, lately, have you seen any specific trends? I know I've talked a lot on this podcast
Yes.
about the SEC growing friendlier toward digital assets writ large. Are you seeing that reflected in exams or not yet? Or is there anything else you're seeing?
With respect to digital assets, I wouldn't necessarily say they are friendlier. I think
Hmm.
they are becoming more knowledgeable
That's
about
good.
the areas that were completely out of their realm of understanding, maybe even just a few years ago. And now they're slowly starting to get it. I think custody being one of them. I think that's
Yeah.
also reflected in a lot of the legislation that's been passed recently. And you and
Hmm.
I talked about that earlier a few weeks ago. But
Yep.
I think it's really important to understand that the SEC has its main tenets that it tends to focus on. The 2026 exam priorities were recently released. It's no surprise that the topics that were indicated are a variation on themes in the past with respect to expense allocation. I think a big one is information security, which leverages nicely into cybersecurity. Even though a
Yep.
lot of these proposed rules were not implemented or finalized or passed, it goes to show that the SEC still takes a lot of consideration and placing a lot of weight on these areas. Just because they're not in final rulemaking doesn't mean that they are not important. So I think these are areas of consideration that managers in particular are mainly aware of if they've been keeping their finger on the pulse of what the SEC's been focused on, but I think the SEC is definitely more knowledgeable about different types of strategies. I think it also depends on the regional office that examines you and the
Oh,
examiners that you
interesting.
get. They vary widely from region to region. So I think it's important once you get that examination request and letter for you to contact counsel, contact your compliance consultant, even just reach out to me. I'm happy to walk anyone through it. My team will do the same, even if you're not a client, and we'll give you our background in what we've dealt with that particular office, even.
Hmm.
And it makes a difference. It really does make a difference understanding who is examining you.
That is incredibly valuable, and it's something maybe a lot of people don't appreciate or recognize that, the
Yeah,
specific examiner and the specific office they work in will have their own priorities, tendencies, things like that. And working with
correct.
someone like you who's so experienced with all of these different ones, and you have a good sense of, oh, John from Kansas City is going to ask for X, Y, and Z, but
That's right.
Alice from San Francisco is going to ask for 1, 2, and 3, and so we got to be prepared for that, and that can give you a real leg up
Absolutely.
in the process.
For sure.
Okay, okay, well, that's super helpful. Want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about your business specifically, and I think you kind of answered this already, but will you work with all kinds of fund managers? Is there anything nothing off limits?
Thing off limits. One thing that we make sure is that in the initial conversation we have with the prospective client is that it's the right fit.
Yeah.
And we are size agnostic, strategy agnostic, but we also want to make sure that the services we are offering are in line with the expectations of a client that wants to engage us. And that's why the introductory call we have with them is really exploratory on both sides. So a prospective client will contact us and say, Dave sent us to you and we want to learn all things about silver. And we will tell them, but then we turn the tables and we want to learn all things about them because we want to make sure that the services we're offering are what they need.
Yeah.
And many times, oftentimes, it is what they need in one way, shape, or form. But oftentimes, it could be something where they may be jumping the gun. It might be too early. We oftentimes get clients that come to us and say, oh, forming a fund. We've engaged counsel. We got a fund admin. You got our auditors, and now we need you. We got the checklist, and you're up next. And we say, this is great. We love that you're being proactive, but save your dollars. You don't need us now. You need us $25 million from now.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
we
When
always make sure to have those exploratory conversations. Yeah.
when do they need you? What's the right time to engage outsourced compliance?
I think the right time is when you know you're going to trigger a regulatory obligation. And I
Got it.
think we are happy to run an analysis for you. And depending on the size of your firm, your intended assets under management, your growth trajectory, all of these things are factors that we take into consideration in determining if you need us right now.
Yeah.
And we will not be one to say, "Oh, we'll engage you and you will engage us and we'll wait. We'll like sit and wait." Because that's
Yeah.
not fair to the client. And now you're spending money on things that you're not utilizing. So the ideal scenario is we run through an exploratory conversation and get all the information we need. And most of the time they do need us, but there are instances where, it's the excitement that gets, them ahead of the game, which I fully appreciate and respect. But the right time is when I think regulatory obligations are immediate or are going to happen sooner rather than later. And we want them to be prepared so they can continue with their fundraising trajectory.
Awesome. Well, there's nothing more exciting than regulatory compliance, so I certainly understand their eagerness.
As he says that tongue in cheek, ladies and gentlemen.
What it's okay, so beyond need for, regulatory assistance, what makes a client a good fit? Or, stated differently, if I'm a fund manager, what should I be looking for in an outsourced
Yeah.
compliance firm?
Think you, as a manager, you should look within and say, within your organization, and say, what resources do I currently have that can help me to manage a regulatory compliance program? Like, who do I have that can do this?
Hmm.
And who do I have that not only can do this, but can do it well and can do it
Competently, yeah.
on a regular basis? Like, this is their job. And if you're honest and you say, well, I have my COO, I have my CFO, and they could do it, right? And the answer is yes, they could, but is that what they should be doing?
Right.
Because now you're dual hatting someone and you're saying, okay, in addition to your primary job, you drew the short stick and now you're going to be our CCO and you're going to manage all of that too. And I think that is the biggest mistake managers make, is not thinking ahead as to how much work this actually does entail.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is something that can be evaluated. And if they're being honest, then they say, okay, now let us see what the next level of resources are that we can
Yep.
implement. So doing that initial analysis, I think, is key.
Makes total sense. How about how you charge for services? Is it project based? Is it monthly? Is it hourly? What's typical?
Typical is we have two models. One is that we can do work on a project basis. It is a flat fee, and we can do a number of things, anything that we would do as a part of maintaining a compliance program or doing ongoing support, we can do it as a project. So you had mentioned at the outset about filing Form ADV or maybe even doing an annual review. We can certainly do that on a project basis, and we can, help you with your regulatory obligation in that way, and we'll charge you a flat fee.
Hmm.
The more common model, and I think the model that clients prefer, is the one that we've been talking about, which is the ongoing
Yeah.
support and maintenance of the compliance program. And we can manage any and all aspects of that program, or we can say take on just bits and pieces of that program. But regardless, it's us being engaged so that we can serve as an extension of your compliance team or become your compliance team. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is
And when you
also charged on a flat fee basis.
uh, okay, so that's like I assume like a monthly or annual cost.
For fully registered investment advisors, it is typically monthly. And
Yeah.
then for our exempt reporting advisors, that is typically a quarterly basis because the obligations are not as voluminous as an RIA's.
Totally. And then you mentioned, you could be an extension to the compliance team or you can be the compliance team. Will you wear the CCO title for folks or does that have to be someone internal?
Ideally, we would like it to be somebody internal.
Hmm.
And the reason being is while we have open dialogue and communication and have regularly scheduled calls with our clients, we are not sitting internally on a day-to-day basis within the organization.
Right.
And that, to us, in Silver's opinion, is something that is critical to being a CCO. And having that inner working knowledge of what's happening on a routine and daily basis allows for a CCO to function in the capacity that the SEC would expect a CCO to function. So while we are not at all saying that the outsourced CCO model is flawed by any means. There are firms that do that and we support them. We feel that a client that is suitable for Silver will have someone internally wearing that CCO hat. They could be dual hatted like we discussed, but then they're reporting to us and
Yeah.
saying, okay, these are all the things that happened in the course of this week. Now what do we do from a regulatory perspective? And that's what I meant by we will be your compliance team because now the CCO is downloaded to us what's happened and we pick up from there and then we manage all of the regulatory requirements and obligations and making sure that you're staying compliant to your program.
Yeah. And then that reduces the burden of being dual headed, like you were talking about before.
Correct.
Like this is a full-time job, but you could wear that title, be on the inside, understanding everything, and leverage this external team to take a lot of that burden off of your plate.
That's exactly right, Dave.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think you've answered all my questions for this one. I've
Wow,
really
thank
enjoyed
you.
this discussion. Thank you so
As
much.
have
Very illuminating.
I. It's wonderful being with you, Dave. Thank you so much for having me on. And, I really appreciate our relationship. And one further thing is, I think your podcast is outstanding. You're taking subjects that normally would not be necessarily entertaining or something that people would like run to learn about. And you're making it something that is digestible and really easy to listen to. And I thank you for bringing this to our industry and the community at large.
No, thank you. That's so kind. I really appreciate that.
No, thank you, Dave. It's been such a pleasure.
Likewise. Well, we will certainly talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, with that scintillating conversation out of the way, we can get to the part you've all been waiting for. The legal disclaimer. On this show, my guests and I discuss laws, regulations, and aspects of fund management from a 10,000-foot view. And nothing I say here, nothing my guests say here is legal, investment, or tax advice. Everything we say is our own personal opinion. Nobody is speaking on behalf of their employers on this show, and it is entirely for educational purposes only. If you're thinking about starting a fund or you're curious about what's involved, this show is a good resource as you explore your options. But if you're going to pull the trigger and actually launch a fund, please engage professional service providers to assist you in the process.